Hi, I'm Edward Funk, and this is podcast number 56, Loretta Young's Greatest Acting Lesson. Now, these podcasts, at least in this part of the podcast, they come from the book Behind the Door, The Real Story of Loretta Young. This is copyright material. This is a paper book, it's an ebook, and it's also an audiobook. Okay, let's get going. Loretta Young was loaned to Columbia Studios to play the title character in the film Gallagher, with Frank Capra as director. And I'll just say right now, Frank Capra was a fabulous director. Um, I'm sure you know a number of them, but let's just say It's a Wonderful Life was one of his huge successes. Okay. Now, Jean Harlow was cast as the second female lead. Loretta recalled, Jean looked so voluptuous, so ready to pluck, that when she walked on the set, all the fellows would go, la, 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 la. And as she walked by, she really didn't walk. She just kind of undulated. And she really didn't even know she was doing it. I think that's just the way her body moved because she could laugh quicker at herself than anyone else. And you'd have to take yourself very seriously to pull her sensuality off and not to be natural. Frank Capra and writer Bob Briskin would sit there on the set and rewrite and add scenes for her just because she was so appealing. I was sitting on the set watching, and I was thinking, gee, I wish they weren't doing that, but I sure know why they are. If Gina and I walked into the room together, you weren't going to be looking at me. Then they changed the name of the film from Gallagher, which was my character, to The Platinum Blonde. However, it was that film in which Loretta learned from Frank Capra the most important lesson that would shape her as an actress. She explained, we were rehearsing a scene and Robert Williams, the male lead, said, let's try doing it this way. Being from the New York stage, he was used to improvising. Then Frank Capra said, well, I don't think I like that idea. Where did that come from? So they were talking, and in the middle of it, Frank said, well, what do you think, Loretta? I said, oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference what I think, Mr. Capra. Just tell me what to do, and I'll try to do it. Very gently, he said, Loretta, oh no, Loretta, that's all acting is, thinking. It made sense to me, and Frank Capra was considered the best director in the business. I liked the idea that an actress could think. What Frank meant was that I could put myself into my character's shoes, and I would listen and react according to what the character would think. Either you exaggerate them or you pull them down. Frank had a wonderful talent for wooing a performance out of actors. He would say, well, that's charming. Oh, do that. I like that. Of course, that opens you up for the next idea that comes along. If you didn't like something, he'd say, you know, if I were you, I think when he comes into the room the first time, don't accept him so easily. You'll find a way to do it, but just don't accept him so quickly. Now, that's what I call directing. I'm quoting Loretta. A little note here. After Loretta shared her memories of making Platinum Blonde, we watched it together. She blurted out, that pig. Then she explained that watching it all these years later, she realized that the leading man, Robert Williams, was so selfish in his scenes with both her and Jean Harlow that his performance was all about himself, unwilling to give anything to either of them. Taxi, with James Cagney, followed. Cagney had been his first major success the year before with Public Enemy. But the dialogue from Taxi is what imitators have been using ever since. You dirty rat. I know I'm not very good. You dirty rat, you. Okay. Laura recalled, I loved Taxi. I had a big crush on Jimmy, but it was the sweetest, nicest, and purest kind of crush. He never knew it. He wasn't one bit interested in me romantically. He was very happily married. Employing the acting lesson that Loretta had learned from Frank Capra, that acting is thinking, she recalled a particular scene that's set in a nightclub. Jimmy's sitting there, and I'm right next to him. He's got his arm around me, and I've got my head on his shoulder, perfectly relaxed. I think our two characters had just been married, and that's the way she felt about it. She was thinking, he'll take care of me, this tough little fellow. I admired the way that Jimmy worked. He was all business and still polite at all times. He didn't even particularly talk fast off screen, but the minute the camera rolled, he was that tough character, no getting around it. And I think for a woman to have a man who's violent that way, but she's the only one he's sensitive with, his caring is doubly important to her. Even though I was only playing a part in the picture, I felt that part of it. Taxi was one of the growing list of Loretta's films and a strong social message. She was Warner Brothers' perfect victim for the harsh realities of the times. Even when she played characters with a tough edge, her big eyes could retract with a look of defiance, uh, from a look of defiance, and then just flood the screen with tears. But as mother Gladys was about to make a professional leap, Loretta commented, decorating had always been a mama's play. She had pushed the furniture around with every resident that she called home. But now she was serious and enrolled at the Chenard and Parsons School of Design at the Otis Art Institute in Los Angeles. Gladys' second marriage was floundering as her decorating career was ascending. Like Earl Young, George Belzer had a wandering eye that led him astray. Again, Gladys was unwilling to look the other way. Loretta's half-sister, Georgiana, recalled how painful her parents' problems were to her. My mother and father and I shared a bedroom, and we had a long sleeping porch. And I remember Dad's bed was out of the sleeping porch. They were like brother and sister, and I just hated that. The Belzers and the Young sisters made a major move from Fifth Street to Sunset Boulevard in Bel Air. The white brick home, with gracious columns, was a Southern colonial built to Gladys's specifications. Pollyanna and Sally now shared a suite instead of a mere room. Everyone contributed, but it was Loretta's salary that primarily made this transition possible. Gladys, meanwhile, was focused on her new career. She was absorbing everything that she could at design school and then practiced at home. Now, I went back and inserted this next couple sentences because I thought it was so telling. Okay. One year, Mama redid the Sunset House twice, including rugs, drapes, even the wallpaper, everything. It was an expensive process, but I was working, Sally was working, Pollyanna was working. David Niven, a friend of Sally's, and fresh from England, made his entrance into their lives. He managed to parlay an invitation to stay in their pool house for a couple of days into over a year. Georgiana was acutely aware of his presence, as Niven eventually was given her room when she was relegated to her parents' room. Writer Daryl Zanuck was instrumental in Warner Brothers' successful thrust of grabbing their storylines out of the newspaper headlines. Loretta never liked Zanuck. She remembered thinking he was a pugnacious little man, yelling and screaming all over the place. Daryl always scared me. Even then, I found him so ill-mannered, and one never knew what to expect. She's going to know a lot more about him when she goes under contract, 20th Century Fox, but that's coming. Loretta also didn't like Howard Hughes, at least as a boyfriend. Loretta recalled, I just went out with him a few times. He had thrown a party for my 19th birthday party, but I barely remember it because I really wasn't interested in him. He was too bossy, too possessive, too self-oriented. Plus, Loretta really didn't need Hughes' money. She was enjoying the financial freedom she was able to provide for herself. She remembered, I used to get all dressed up. I'd put on my beautiful Russian broadtail coat, gloves, alligator bag, and the right hat, and I'd go to Irene's shop located in Bullitt's, Wilshire. I would walk in and I'd say, evening clothes. Someone would say, oh, yes, Miss Young. And they parade these evening clothes out, and I'd sit in. Then I'd choose one or two. Then I'd go buy some shoes. I love doing that. It was my idea of being a successful movie star. Loretta always pre-checked with Gladys to see how much she could spend. Gladys handled all the finances, and Loretta, the major breadwinner, never questioned how the money was used or the amount she was allotted. But even movie stars were affected by the Depression. The Depression was hurting the movie business. 5,000 of the country's 16,000 movie theaters were closed. In 1932, Fox Studios lost $17 million, and Warner Brothers ran an additional deficit of $14 million. In August of that year, the brass decided to cut salaries. Loretta's 1,000 weekly salary was reduced to 800. Warner Brothers' Playgirl was Loretta's last film to be released in 1932. Her co-star was Norman Foster, who had made a name for himself on the New York stage. Loretta and Norman would pair immediately again in Weekend Marriage. Loretta's marriage to Claudette Colbert was cooling, and he was falling under Loretta's spell. He knew that Loretta loved to dance and asked Sally to show him the latest steps. Sally was a crazy about it, and she eventually should marry him. But one night, Sally and I, and this is Georgiana recalling, one night Sally and I were watching Loretta leave with Norman, and I remember Sally running to her room crying. The fact that Loretta had so little interest in Norman just aggravated the situation. She was really more interested in George Brent at the time. Here was just another situation where everything was going Loretta's way with Sally reduced to tears. That's it.